Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Should I be starting now?
I'm sorry for the technical delay. Hold on one moment while I get this sorted out. Oh, Brad. Sorry, PowerPoint just crashed on me, but I will get it loaded real. 1 second.
Should I start with the intro or?
Yeah, you can go with the intro. I'm going to load up the PowerPoint.
Okay. Well, hello, and thank you for joining the Community Orchard Network for our 6th webinar on urban orchards. My name is Phil Forsyth. I'm the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Orchard Project, and I'll be today's moderator. So we're here today to talk about community orchards and provide an open dialogue on everything that encompasses. So whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just want to find out if you should explore planting fruit and nut trees, we hope you'll find this as a valuable resource for new ideas. In addition to our webinar series, the Community Orchard Network operates a Google Group listserv, which you will all be added to by participating in this webinar if you're not already on it. This is where you can post questions and resources and find out about future meetings and webinars. If you know anyone else who might want to join the group, they can contact orchard@actrees.org. Today's meeting will feature 2 guest speakers. We'll start with Lee Reich, who is author of many books, including Grow Fruit Naturally, and he'll be speaking about growing fruits in small spaces. And then Richard Hodges will have our story from the field. He's the program manager of ReTree US, which he'll talk about his experience planting school orchards in Maine. So this webcast will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted in the Google group later this week. This webcast is intended to be interactive. Each speaker will speak for 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for question and answer. So please, at any point, pose a question in the question box, and I will pose them to the speakers when they're done with their presentation. You can also add comments in the chat box in the bottom panel. So we're going to start with Lee Reich. I'll do a quick bio. He is a PhD and an avid farm dinner, which is more than a gardener and less than a farmer, and has graduate degrees in soil science and horticulture. He eventually turned from plant and soil research with the USDA and Cornell University to writing, lecturing, and consulting. His writing includes a number of gardening books, including Grow Fruit Naturally, Uncommon Fruits for Every Garden, and Landscaping with Fruit, all of which are highly recommended. And a bi-monthly column he writes for Associated Press. His Farmed In is a test site for innovative techniques in soil care, pruning, growing fruits and vegetables. So welcome, Lee. You're on the air.
Well, thanks, Phil. Good to be here. So I'll get started right away. I want to see how to get to the to my slides.
Hi, Lee. You should have keyboard and mouse.
Can I get to my?
Yeah, you should have keyboard and mouse control.
Okay.
Once you control in the bottom left corner, you're good to go.
Oh, okay. Okay. So Americans have always had large expanses of land. We've had a whole country that was pretty much empty not so long ago, and we always had large fruit trees. This is a photo of orchard of Cortland apples taken in 1910. So trees were large, plants were spaced out, and of course things aren't like that now. Now we have smaller spaces to garden in, and that doesn't mean that we can't have our orchards. This is one of my points, is that you don't need a big space to have fruit plants. Maybe not an orchard per se, but you can incorporate fruit plants into your planting. And what I want to do is talk about how you might do that and what plants you might use. So just a few basics. One thing, some basic needs of fruit plants. One, as far as sight, most fruit plants, not all, and I'll mention a couple that don't need this, need full sun. Full sun means 6 hours or more of full summer sunlight. And most fruit plants need well-drained soils. That's soil where water does not sit in them too long. So the most important thing, really, then, once you have this, is choosing appropriate plants for small sites. And obviously, the best thing to do is choose small plants. Those are that are naturally small, or they're easy to maintain small. And some choices involved. For instance, here's a photo of genetic dwarf fruit trees, peach trees. And genetic dwarfs are one way that plants are small. These are plants that are just genetically, they happen to be programmed to be small. Genetic dwarf fruit trees, peach trees, instead of having, say, 6 inches from leaf to leaf along the stem, they'll only be maybe 1 inch. That telescopes down the stems so that the plants are smaller. Here's a photo. This is a photo of a well-known fruit breeder that I visited about 30 years ago in New Hampshire, Dr. Elwin Meader, and he was into breeding genetic dwarf peach trees, not only for their small size, but also because where it's really cold out, snow will actually cover them and protect them from the cold, because peaches don't tolerate that much cold. So another way to have very small plants, trees, is by grafting a scion, or say like a stem from, say, a McIntosh apple tree or whatever variety you have, onto a special rootstock that dwarfs it. Here's a photo of me with a winesap apple tree that I grafted onto a very dwarfing rootstock. And this tree was about 10 years old. And you can see that it hasn't grown very much and has quite a good crop for a small tree. Of course, you don't get that much fruit because there's not that much stem to hang from. But anyway, that's another way of dwarfing fruit trees. And this photo, just to mention the photo there, this is a photo that was taken in Britain a number of years ago, showing me in an experimental orchard of dwarf fruit trees. These trees are full size, that's how big they're going to be, and you can see that they're quite small. So first thing is you want small plants. Second thing is you want a plant with few or no pest problems. And the reason you want few or no pest problems is because most people don't want to spray for pests, and there are certain parts of the world, like here in the Northeast, where fruit trees have a lot of pest problems. So you want few or no pest problems. You want to plant fruits that you like to eat, and preferably also pretty plants. And the reason for that is if you have a small space to grow, if you have a small yard or maybe even a balcony, if you have pretty plants, then you can incorporate them into the landscape. You don't have to have a dedicated orchard. You can just have as part of your landscape can be pretty plants. And this is another reason to plant something that's few or no pest problems, because if you have something that has pest problems and you are going to have to spray it, you don't want to be spraying, say, near a deck, near where kids play outside, or maybe among other plants that don't need sprays. So you want something that has few or no pest problems, fruits you like to eat, and preferably pretty plants. Let me give you some examples of special landscape features of what I like to call luscious landscape plants. These are plants that are pretty as well as bearing good tasting fruit. And this is, people plant a birch tree for its white bark. So if you look at fruit plants, they also have all these landscape features that you seek in other plants. So fall color, for instance, that's one thing people seek in an ornamental plant. So on your right there, upper right, that's lowbush blueberry in the fall. So you can see that fall color really rivals that of any other ornamental plant. Looking at, say, just ornamental fruit, this is something called sea berry. And this plant has these bright orange fruits that ripen late summer and fall, and they really stand out nicely against the olive green foliage of the plant. And this actually has been grown as an ornamental, often as an ornamental and not as a fruiting plant. But you put this in your landscape, you have a nice shrub, an ornamental shrub, and you can also pick fruit from it. Here's another one. A lot of fruit trees have very nice flowers, and I'm just picking this one just as one of many. This is medlar, has these blossoms. One thing I particularly like about medlar blossoms is that they open later than other blossoms. So first of all, they're not threatened by spring frost, but also they open after the leaves have unfolded, so that each one is sort of cradled in a background of a world of dark green leaves. Another ornamental aspect or thing that we value in landscape plants is fragrance. So this is clove currant, which not only has these ornamental trumpet-shaped flowers, but also they're unbelievably fragrant. When this blooms at my house, I can hardly work in the garden. It's almost you get a little dizzy just from taking in the smell so often. And espalier is a popular way to grow, or not popular. People like the way espalier looks. Not many people grow espaliers, but one thing about an espalier, if it's a fruit plant, is you get the fruit plus you get very ornamental plants. So here's a current espalier that I had trained against the fence in my vegetable garden, and you can see the fruit's very pretty, and it looks nice, and it makes a nice border for the garden. Potted plants, that's another way another type of ornamental plant. So here's one, a potted fig tree. Even if you live in far northern areas where fig would not be hardy, you can grow a fig in a pot. You get the ornamental aspect, plus you get a tree that normally would not grow in your climate. And here's a photo of, this is actually my brother's garden. He has a very small vegetable garden. And around the garden, you can see it's that the starkness of the vertical fence against the horizontal land is softened by the shrubs around the garden, and those shrubs are all fruit plants. And the little tree behind there on the left is also a fruit plant. So you can use these fruit plants, incorporate them out in your landscape with good effect. So let's talk about some plants that might be good for small spaces. Now, all these plants won't fulfill all these. They won't be super ornamental and take up small spaces. But let me just go through a number of plants that are good for small spaces. So the first two, actually, I don't consider to be very ornamental. This would be strawberries and raspberries. They're not super ornamental plants, but they can surely be grown in small places. And strawberries, for every square foot you plant in strawberries, you can get 2 pounds of strawberries. So that's a nice yield for a small spot. Raspberries, you get 1 to 2 pounds per linear foot. And in this lower portion, right lower left, those are alpine strawberries, which actually are somewhat ornamental if you grow them in pots. I just have them in pots along the walk to my front door, and they're quite tasty. And you can see the white ones in my hands actually are ripe. They're white alpine strawberries, which I like because birds don't eat them. They don't see them. Here, this is just a shot. This is actually in New York City, in a backyard in New York City. Fall gold raspberry, which was not super ornamental, but not unornamental, but gives a nice crop of very, very delicious fruits. Those were actually bred by that fruit breeder I showed, Elwin Meter. Okay, another more ornamental, not super ornamental, but quite ornamental, blackberries. So blackberries have nice flowers. They look like wild roses in the spring. And if you grow thornless kinds, which I recommend, the thornlessness is a nice feature. It's smooth green stems, and you can get 3 pounds of blackberries per plant. So in the front of my house, I used to have this sloping lawn here, and what I did is I built a wall, backfilled with soil, and then planted a group of plants that enjoy similar conditions. These are all plants in the heath family. And the bed, it's hard to take a photo of this, but it's got an interesting contrast in leaf textures and colors. And this is what I call my heath bed. And these are a lot of plants in the heath family, including rhododendron, mountain laurel, and other ornamental plants in that family. But I've also included lowbush blueberry, lingonberry, and huckleberry, which all three are very ornamental in their own right and make delicious fruits and take up not very much space. So here I am. My neighbors probably think I'm super hungry and I'm just grazing leaves because I'm so hungry. But in fact, I'm grazing fruits, berries. And this is, I think, the lowbush blueberries were ripe, and I'm just harvesting them as I walk by. And here's the way the bed looks in the fall. On your left is huckleberry. This is true huckleberry in the family in the genus Gay-Lussacia, and it has great fall color. And then as you go towards the center, it's more lingonberries, and then more towards the right is lowbush blueberry, but they all intermix, and they really do nicely together in the bed and in the kitchen. Here's lowbush blueberry, which spreads by underground runners, so it makes a nice ground cover. It only grows 18 inches high. And this is when the planting was young, before it started to spread too much. But you can see you put the plants about 2 feet apart each way, and eventually forms a solid, ornamental, tasty ground cover. Here's the flowers of lowbush blueberry. They're really ornamental plant year-round. It has nice flowers in the spring. The foliage looks nice and healthy green all summer. And then the fall, you get that nice fall color. And then winter even, the stems are reddish. So here's lingonberry in that same bed. You get 1/4 pound per square foot. Beautiful plant. It has these evergreen holly-like leaves, small holly-like leaves, as far as their green sheen. And the fruit is quite tasty. It's not sweet, but it's actually one of my favorite fruits. A lot of people know lingonberry only from IKEA jams, but if you grow this, they're really good just popped into your mouth too. And as I said, it really combines nicely with lowbush blueberry, both in the kitchen and in your mouth. I mean, both in the garden and in your mouth. Here's the way the lingonberry flowers look, also ornamental. This whole family is quite ornamental, that Heath family. Here's some of the fruits. As long as I'm talking about blueberry, I also talk about highbush blueberry, which is different from lowbush blueberry. It grows 6 or 7 feet high, but also very, very ornamental bush. A lot of people have said that if it wasn't such a tasty fruit, it would be grown as an ornamental. So they grows, as I said, 6 or 7 feet high, does not spread by underground runners. And the important thing with blueberry, oh, this didn't come out so well. Anyway, if anybody wants a copy of this, they can email me. But this is the important thing with blueberry and with the whole Heath family is getting the soil right. They really are very specific in their soil conditions, and if you don't get the soil right, they only grow hardly at all through the year, through the season, and then they yield very little. If you get it right, they make like 1 foot or 2 or even 3 feet of growth and bear really good crop the following year. Important with highbush blueberries is keeping the birds at bay, and some people choose to share their berries with the birds. The birds don't always share, so I choose to have a walk-in. I used to call it a blueberry cage, but now I call it a blueberry temple. So this keeps the birds out. The side netting is up year-round. The top net is only while the berries are ripening. Okay, moving on to another fruit, very blueberry-like in its appearance, but not in flavor, is Juneberry. This is the Amelanchius genus, also known as shadbush, serviceberry. So this is a plant also grown as an ornamental, great for small gardens because you can keep it small, and some of them are bushes, which are small. So here it is in bloom. This is one of the more ornamental aspects. Here's the berries. People often compare them to blueberries, which they do look like, but they don't taste like. And they actually have the flavor, sort of the sweetness and richness of a sweet cherry with a little almond aftertaste, so they're really quite delicious. And they're very cosmopolitan in the soil needs. They can take just about any type of soil. Moving on to another genus, there's ribes, currants in this case. Red, white, and pink currants are all the same except for the color. You get 3 to 10 pounds per bush. The fruits are the most ornamental part of the plant and really quite nice. Here's the flowers in the spring, pretty nice. They look like lace hanging there. Here's the way the fruits look, and they're tasty and jelly. If you let them get really ripe, you can just pop in your mouth. They're really good. Nice thing about currants is they can take shade. They can take quite a bit of shade in fruit. One of the few fruits that can do that, and also they're deer resistant. And then closely related to currants and also deer resistant and tolerant of shade are gooseberries. A lot of people think that all gooseberries are small, green, and tart. You can see here that they're not all small. This is quite large. This is the variety jumbo. And both the currant and the gooseberry make a bush maybe 3 or 4 feet high and wide. Very easy to care for. Very few pest problems. Oh, here's a not very good photo of a gooseberry bush. Just to show that they're not all small and green. Also, here's some of the gooseberries in my collection. They vary in size and flavor, and the best ones are so-called dessert gooseberries. I'm not very good at cooking fruit, so I like ones that you can just pop in your mouth. So the best ones have flavors really as good as a good grape, a good plum, and these are the varieties that I would recommend both for pest resistance and for good flavor. Yet another plant in that same genus, European blackcurrant, you can get up to 10 pounds per bush. This is a fruit that fresh, people either hate or love. I happen to love them. It's one of my favorite fruits of all. But cooked, just about everybody likes them. If anybody's ever had creme de cassis, that's flavored by blackcurrant. Very easy to grow. Once again, deer resistant, shade resistant. Very few, if any, notable insect or disease problems. All it needs is pruning every year. And one more ribes. This is called clove currant. This is the only one that's a Native American fruit, and that's the one with these really nice, fragrant yellow flowers in the spring. Here they are again. And here's what the fruit looks like. It's quite different from the other blackcurrant. It has a sweet tart flavor, very good. They ripen over a very long season, which is good or not good, depending if you want to, make a batch of jam or not. But this is really a pest-tolerant plant. Of all the ribes plants, this is the only one that really needs sun. The other ones don't need, as I said, much sun. This one does like a lot of sun. And beyond that, this plant is very tolerant of cold, heat, drought, insects, diseases, deer. So this is one of the easiest fruits to grow. Okay, moving on to another fruit, vine, is hardy kiwi fruit. You can get good yields. You can see what the fruit looks like. It looks very much like the store kiwi fruit, except that the fruit is smaller. It has a smooth skin, so you just pop it in your mouth. You can see inside looks about the same. It actually tastes better, though. And my favorite thing about the fruit is it doesn't have one of those green tags on it that describe it, so you don't have to peel it off. There's actually two species that are usually used for their fruit. One is very rampant growing, so I would not recommend it for a small garden. The other one, Actinidia colomicta, is the one I would recommend for a small garden. It's very tame in its growth, has very ornamental leaves too, which you can see here. One thing you need a separate male and female plant, and you do need good drainage. And ideally, if you really want to get good yields, it would be pruned every year. So here's the way the leaves look, really, really beautiful leaves, among my favorite of any plant. And there's the flowers, and you get fruit. Here's my plant on a trellis. And here's the way the fruit looks. So I have a 5-wire T-trellis, so the fruiting arms are splayed across the trellis, so it's really nice. It's just like a ceiling of fruit when I want to pick the fruit. And then moving on, tart cherry. This never gets to be a very big tree. This is the variety North Star. You can see it's loaded with fruit. It has some pest problems, but it's not too bad. Quince, another small fruiting tree, very ornamental in the spring with its flowers, in the fall with its fruit. The fruits look sort of like Golden Delicious apples on steroids. Medlar, which I showed a flower previously, this is a fruit tree. You only need one tree. It does not need cross-pollination. It gets to be about 8 feet high and wide. Sort of an interesting fruit that a lot of people think is ugly. I happen to think it's not ugly. But you pick it when it's hard in the fall. You have to let it sit on a counter, and then when it's ready to eat, here's when you pick it. And then when it's ready to eat, it really looks quite disgusting inside, but it really tastes good. It tastes like very rich applesauce with little winey overtones. So you just don't eat with your eyes, eat with your mouth.
Sorry to interrupt, Lee. If we could try and finish up soon. We're running close on time.
Yeah, I'm going to speed it up. Okay, so potted fruits. Let me just quickly say some things about potted fruits because this really expands what you can grow. So potted fruits, if you are going to grow fruits in pots, you want especially small ones. These are so-called columnar apples that bear a lot of fruit in a very small space. Here you can grow regular apple on a dwarfing rootstock. One thing nice about potted fruits, if you have a late frost threatened, such as on this peach tree, I just moved it into the garage. Here's my backyard. No, this is Versailles, where they had a lot of potted trees. Here's for watering is very important. Two things with potted fruit trees, watering and overwintering. So there's an automatic watering. Here's another way I water with the drip tubes going to each plant. And also periodically, every year or two, a potted fruit tree needs to be repotted so that the roots can explore new soil and get nutrients out of it. And just cutting back the roots. Packing new soil in, and it's a kumquat, which isn't hardy, but I can grow out there. There's a guava, strawberry guava. There's the alpine strawberries in a pot. In my hand. Oh, there's Adam and Eve, remember, with figs. They used figs as clothing, but you can also grow them in pots. They bear really quickly, and they have a number of unique characteristics that make them very easy to grow in pots, even in North. Here's a couple of varieties that I grow. Here's some more of the varieties I grow. Espalier, finally, way to pack a lot of fruit into a small area, very ornamental plants. That was an apple tree at Monet's garden, not my garden. Here's my garden. What I recommend for Espalier is Asian pears on semi-dwarfing rootstocks or red currant or spur-type apples. There's red currant. Let me just quickly go through this. I won't say how I did this. You can just... In one of my books, I have a book, the pruning book, that tells details of pruning this. But this is red currant being trained to that T. Takes 2 prunings a year, and then you get that. Here's the way one part of my yard looks with a lot of fruit trees packed in there. And if anybody wants more, here's some books. And that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Lee. If you can stay on the line, we're going to have Richard Hodges talk, and then we'll take questions for both speakers at the end.
Okay.
Okay, so our next speaker is Richard Hodges. He's the program manager at ReTree US, which is a nonprofit project dedicated to promoting environmentally sustainable, socially just food system. ReTree US plants orchards with local schools and provides educational programs that empower young people and their families to grow their home gardens. They're based in Maine. They have a farm in Durham, Maine, and work with 10 or more schools in that state. Maine allows us to grow organic produce and make it available for our programs. The farm earnings also help support the program. And Richard Hodges, thank you very much for being here. I'm very excited to hear about your program. Thanks. Richard, you're on the air.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm happy to be here today, talk about ReTree US and the programs we provide. So as we're going through the slides here, just going to have us move forward. Got some fancy graphics there. So ReTree US is a nonprofit program. We have a fiscal sponsor, and that's through the United Charitable Programs, which is a larger nonprofit organizations that make charitable programs like ReTree US a lot easier to administer. They take care of the filing status and a lot of other financial details. So big focus of what we do is planting educational orchards in schools, complete with educational signs, so anybody walking through the orchard at any time could learn about why there's an orchard there and what benefits. We'll get more into that as we move on. We also do workshops in the schools with the orchards to teach folks about pruning and general orchard care, as well as varieties to grow and ways to maintain fruit trees so that they are fruitful. Mentoring home gardeners is another aspect of the program that kind of spills over into more than just tree fruit and trying to get folks to be able to cultivate their own food at home. And the idea behind a lot of this is just trying to create access to healthy food for anybody. And fruit trees, I think, is a really easy way to get food in schools. I'm a big fan of school gardens, but am aware of some of the hardships that school gardens face. A lot of times not having a paid staff member to maintain the gardens during the summer. Fruit trees can be easier to maintain, and so that's a big part of that model. So as was mentioned, the mission of RETRIES is to promote environmentally sustainable, socially just food system by providing education, practical resources, and mentorship. Fruit trees being practical resources among other resources that we provide. So the major component of what we're trying to accomplish here is education. I like a quote from ancient poet. China says that if you are thinking months ahead, plant a seed. If you are thinking 10 years ahead, plant a fruit tree. And if you're thinking 100 years ahead, educate the people. So that's a big part of what we do, and empowering the next generation to have a connection to the planet. And we see fruit trees as a way to connect children and anyone else involved to the planet directly. It's a pretty clear link. When you are planting a tree, you're going right into the earth, and you nurture it all the way up. So we feel that this connection can really provide ongoing benefits to children, and that it's one way to allow things to happen organically, an organic connection to the planet that we find very helpful. So our orchards are our connection to our way of connecting youth to the planet. This is just a basic model of what an orchard could look like. By no means do we carbon copy orchards. They're very much relative to the schoolyard. Our orchards tend to be 15 to 20 larger trees, so I'd say about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch in caliper. And those are trees that we get bare root. So they come through the mail, and they're completely dormant. And but they're good-sized trees, because when we put them in the schools, we like to kind of have that instant gratification. Also, if a soccer ball comes flying and hits a little tree, it's you know, these larger trees are more apt to sustain a little bit more damage. And this general overview, as I mentioned, isn't by any means what is necessarily you're going to find in every school. This is a model. And this has a fence along the perimeter, and we've only actually done that in one of our schools that has a lot of deer pressure. Most of the other schools haven't necessitated a fence. And a fence, when you're working with schools, you also have to deal with maintenance, and maintenance has to deal with the fruit trees. So making things as easy for maintenance. So some of what we've been doing is less of the shrubs as of late and more of the larger trees. And then in the future, we hope to incorporate more of the smaller fruit. Much of what was mentioned in the previous lecture, I think, would be very applicable in terms of some of the small fruit that would be great in the home garden would also be the same in a schoolyard, dealing with pests and with how well it grows. So moving forward, a lot of what we try to achieve is hands-on education, so experiential education. I have found through my career as an educator to be some of the most salient sorts of education, some of the education that's really going to stick with students more than anything else. So that's why these orchards are designed to be hands-on, and also that they have a self-exploration component. So students are able to visit the orchards, and even family members, parents, can, as they're walking through the school, they can learn about the ecological and nutritional benefits of growing food locally, and also the benefits that it has to the environment. And these orchard signs we found to be a major element of what we're trying to achieve, because they communicate important messages without someone having to be on hand. And sometimes just giving folks the opportunity to explore for themselves and learn that way is the most effective. Other times, being present and communicating that information is really important. So these next couple slides will kind of overview a brief introduction of some of the orchard signs we provide in the schools. For instance, you know, there's a sign that we'll talk about. This isn't a sign, but it kind of overviews what the content of our signs are. And our signs are on aluminum. We get assigned signs from buildasign.com. They print them on aluminum, and just that's one way to really have them last a real long time. So it talks about, the signs talk about how fruit trees are good for the environment, how it benefits wildlife, habitat. It's not always habitat that we're, or animals that we're really happy to have all the time, but it's habitat nonetheless. And we can get into pest issues as we move along here. But also just the idea that thinking about the food system and living in Maine, I still see apples that come from New Zealand, and Maine is a historical apple community. There's a great deal of apple history in Maine, and actually one of our signs that we have is about apple history in Maine. So it's pretty sad to actually see these apples from New Zealand, and I think that's a really teachable moment to talk about. So it saves a lot of resources. Trees obviously absorb carbon dioxide rather than, and also prevent carbon dioxide from entering into the atmosphere. So as I was talking about, yeah, it benefits air quality, and we also get into water and how trees prevent erosion and can actually even clean water. And our orchards, we plant varieties that can sustain a lot of pest pressure and are somewhat resistant to scab and so on, so that they do not need to be sprayed. Well, or they could benefit from being sprayed, but we're not going to spray them. And that's another educational component that we are going to be having on our signs, is identifying spots on your apples. And I think that's an important message, that apples aren't necessarily supposed to be blemish-free. So kind of getting into that and what it means to be spray-free. which is even beyond organic, because some organic sprays can still be somewhat harmful. So moving forward, we also talk about how orchards benefit us directly, obviously benefiting the planet, as I mentioned, but also just eating fresh food actually contains even more vital nutrients. It's also more delicious the fresher you have it. And if we're advocating for folks to grow their own food, as I mentioned, even if things are grown organically, it doesn't mean that they're free of any sprays that might not be the best for us. So really growing food yourself is one of the best things you can do for your own health and for the health of the environment, is a message we try to convey. And moving forward as well, we say, we like to convey the idea of permaculture. And that's the idea that putting in some work at the beginning, you end up needing to do less work over time and more just benefiting from the work. So the idea is kind of conveying what permaculture means, because it's a word that I feel like it's thrown around a lot, but it's pretty simple in essence, that you're trying to do less work and more achievement. And I think that's a great concept. Less energy expended and more achieved is how I like to summarize it. So also, I've noticed working with kids in gardens and in orchards that food that children grow themselves seems to be tastier, and kids that grow their own kale, I've found, like to eat kale better. The same will go for an apple that maybe has a couple spots. If the student grows it themselves, I feel like they're much more apt to eat it, even if it doesn't look perfect, and actually really enjoy the satisfaction of achieving that fruit, really seeing the fruit of their labor. It also creates kind of a haven in the school, is what we're looking to do. So we're creating a beautiful space in the schools as well, and school can be a stressful environment. Also noticed that some students who really don't thrive in class situations can do really well outdoors, and this provides a venue for learning to happen in a non-traditional way, so not inside of a classroom, which is what a lot of students need. So as I mentioned, mentorship is an important part of what we do, and we're trying to involve families more with what we're doing. So with these educational workshops, we're trying to teach folks about pruning, about planting, and the whole process. We're also trying to get folks to grow. As I mentioned, I'm an advocate for kale, making other foods available beyond just tree fruit as well. The idea is that we're trying to make healthy food accessible to anyone, even if you just have a sunny window. We're growing kale boxes that folks can put in the window. And as was evident in the last presentation, you can even grow fruit trees out of a pot. And moving forward here, part of what we're trying to do is provide food also on a sliding scale, and we do have a farm in Durham, and we try to grow enough produce and make that available on a sliding scale. And I think just about to wrap up here. So finally, what we're starting to work on now is what I've called the Apple Core, and that is aligning lessons from the orchard to standards to make it easier for teachers to incorporate lessons, orchard-based lessons, into curriculum. And this is something that's in process, and there are lessons being formed. There are already some tree-based lessons that are on the Teach Me Food and Farm website that I'd be happy to point folks in that direction. If you search the web for Teach Me Food and Farm, you can find lessons on gardening in general that are aligned to Maine standards, and a lot of time that's not too different. One of the lessons that we're working on right now is a grafting lesson where students are able to graft their own fruit trees that have some historical significance in Maine, and they'll be able to take that fruit tree home and plant it and literally take those lessons home with them. And this next slide just kind of overviews the orchards in Maine. It may not be all that relevant for folks outside of the state. And so we're actually in 13 schools right now, and as well as working with 2 other nonprofit organizations. And the idea is Retrias, US is at the end of the name because the aim is to expand beyond Maine, working on creating a model that will allow me not necessarily to be involved in each planting as I have been, and maybe working with master gardeners and food corps members to distribute trees around the country and make more orchards and schools all over the country. So that's what we are up to. So as I said, 13 schools in Maine, as well as 2 other nonprofit organizations in the state. Yeah, I don't think that's mine.
Well, thank you very much, Richard and Lee, for your great presentations. We do have a little bit of time left for some questions. I did also want to mention, so both of you have websites if people want more info, leereich.com and retreeus.org if people want to connect. So we do have a few questions here. First one, maybe either of you could answer this, or I could chime in as well. What fruit trees can withstand wildlife pressure, in particular deer and rabbits?
I'll just air that really quick. As far as school orchards go, I don't think there's any particular varieties that deal well with that sort of pressure, but I also didn't mention that each school orchard that we have has an orchard caretaker, and they get emails from us as far as what maintenance needs to be done. And as far as what I recommend is in the fall when rodent pressure, particularly voles, tend to be really pretty malicious to fruit trees. They'll girdle the whole base of the tree. I recommend hardware cloth or screening because that still lets air flow in, so you're not going to create rot around the tree. So you can put, give a little space before the tree and put that that hardware cloth or screen around the base of the tree, and you can tie it off with twine or anything to secure it. And I'm welcome to I invite both of your resolutions to that as well.
Well, I do the same thing for rodents. As far as deer pressure, pretty much deer eat just about anything except for, as I said, the currants and the gooseberries. Also, they're not particularly small trees, but pawpaw trees, which grow pretty far north, perhaps not into Maine, are pretty deer resistant, as are American persimmon trees, which also both can be grown into zone 5 at least. And rabbits, I guess, will eat just about anything.
Yes, so in my experience also, some of the uncommon fruits are more resistant. Lee mentioned pawpaws and persimmons, also figs. Really depends on your climate area what you can grow, but a lot of the common fruits are very susceptible, of course.
And fences work for deer too.
Yes, of course. The fence is a good option.
I Oh, I also saw there was a question about unique recipes for some of the fruits.
Yeah, so that question, yeah, okay. So what are some unique recipes
Oh,
for some of the, I guess, more unusual fruits that you mentioned?
right. I don't really have a good answer to that, only because I'm really bad at cooking fruit, and most of the fruit I like are fruits you can just pop into your mouth. So I guess the only thing I ever made that was really good was I took pawpaw, uh, put it through a mill just to make it really nice and smooth, put it in custard cups, and then put some creme de cassis on top of it before I ate it. And that's about it for my cooking.
So Richard, I've got one for you. Um, do you prepare or cook any of the fruit with the children, or is your program primarily focused on harvesting and planting?
Yeah, so at this point there is not cooking. As I said, we've partnered with Food Corps in the past, which is an organization that does a lot of that work and would encourage them to do that. Because, you know, I pretty much put these fruit trees in. I like to plant fruit that can be eaten right fresh. I'm a fan as well of just the straight to the mouth idea. So actually, as far as pear trees go, you know, we'll plant Asian pears that don't need to sit at all off the tree. They can just be eaten straight. And so to answer that question more directly, at this point, I don't do any preparation with the kids, but I encourage those who are at the school, say teachers or Food Corps members, to do that.
Oh, there's a question about HASCAPs. HASCAPs? Hello?
Yep.
You
Okay.
want me to address that question?
Sorry, I got cut off. I'm back though.
I see there's a question about HASCAPs. Do you want me to address that one?
Sure, that's great.
So HASCAPs, in case anybody's not familiar with them, are an edible species of honeysuckle. I grew them many, many years ago. I was not, well, I have to say I did not give them prime space in my garden, but I was not, what did manage to grow, I was not that enthralled with either the yield or the flavor. And then more recently, there's been a lot of breeding on them using more than one species. And supposedly they're getting better, although I did have an opportunity to taste some at a conference up in Canada where I guess they're planting a lot of them. And it's sad to say I'm still not all that enthralled with them.
Lee, I've got another one, and I know you've talked about this in presentations you've given here, is growing espalier fruit. I know you have some strong opinions on how well that works here,
Yeah.
so I think people would be interested to hear about that.
Well, I think if somebody's going to go out and buy a pre-espalier, apple tree, which often is sold, they're not going to have good success. You can bend the branches the way you want them to be bent, but a good espalier, it's just the fruit totally cover the branches and doesn't have long stems obstructing the sort of the tracery of the branches. So if you are going to grow, really want success with a fruit tree espalier, what I recommend is either grow what are called spur type apples or columnar apples and the spur type on dwarfing rootstock. And this would be a full dwarfing rootstock, not a semi-dwarfing rootstock. Or Asian pears on semi-dwarfing rootstock espalier quite well. Or as I showed in the slides, red currant also is quite easy to espalier.
And Lee's pruning book gives a lot of detail on how to espalier a tree. If you are interested in trying that, definitely a good technique if you have very limited space. Let me see what other questions we have. I guess top recommended fruit trees for urban gardens.
Well, I would recommend things that really are most pest resistant and you get good results from, and that would include pawpaws, medlars, American persimmon, if you're in the north, if you far enough south, say south of New Jersey, you can grow Asian persimmons, or even south of the northern Pennsylvania, even some varieties of Asian persimmons you can grow. And also, I would emphasize not stressing too much fruit trees. People often think when they plant fruits, it's fruit trees. There's a lot of really good fruiting bushes that you can grow that are much, much easier to grow than fruit trees.
Yeah, and on that note, also recommend beech plum, which is it's kind of a bridge between a tree and a shrub. Beech plum grow really well and small fruit and minimal issues. And as far as planting apples in school or at home, there are a lot of issues that face them. So two varieties that we've been planting a lot in schools are Liberty, and Liberty is kind of a poster child for disease resistance. That's Liberty. And Northern Spy is also one that grows so well that, I don't know, there's a myth that it grows so fast that it smushes bugs and everything in the fruit, so they can't live. But Northern Spy is one as well that shows a lot of disease and pest resistance. So, yeah, I do caution against planting things like Macintosh and Golden Delicious, things that folks are really used to. Although Honeycrisp also has some good disease resistance and scab resistance.
I've got a follow-up question, sort of. So a lot of organic recommendations emphasize that larger rootstocks tend to be more robust and resistant to disease and pests than true dwarf rootstocks. And Lee, I was wondering if you're aware of any research to back that up, or if you agree with that take. Obviously, we have very small spaces, we need to think about dwarfs. But
yeah, I would say a larger rootstock makes a more robust tree, and that the tree will grow larger, that's for sure. And maybe a larger tree will have more fruits on it, so it can lose more fruits to insects and diseases. But I do not believe that there's any research that shows that a larger tree, except for maybe a different microclimate higher up, that a larger tree would be more resistant to insects and diseases. Of course, every rootstock can be susceptible to certain root diseases. So it could be that seedling rootstocks generally are very there's a lot of genetic diversity, and they are generally pretty tough. And some of the super dwarfing rootstocks are a little more finicky about their, whether the soil drainage is good, whether they have good fertility, things like that. But as far as what's going to affect the fruit, I don't think there's good research, any research to show that that on a full-size rootstock that the fruit will be more resistant, except for, as I said, being in a different microclimate.
Okay, we got one more question, and this is for Richard. So this is actually my own question. So working with school orchards here in Philadelphia, they're often our most challenging partners, and that schools' staff are overworked, underpaid, and there's high turnover. And so I'm wondering what has been successful for you in finding good, successful caretakers of school orchards? Who are the people taking care of them, and what schools? What it is about successful schools that maybe should be looked at for choosing new schools?
Sure. So we have an online application for any school interested in having an orchard planted at their school. And I would say the biggest thing that I look at in those applications is the commitment of what we call our orchard caretakers. And the orchard caretaker is somebody actually in the school who is going to respond to the emails I send out saying, okay, it's time to remulch your trees. Make sure you don't push the mulch right up against the base of the tree. Okay, during the first 2 years, it's been a dry couple weeks, really soak your trees. So yes, finding the right staff member is very important. And also part of signing on to be an orchard caretaker is that knowing that staff turns over, that they will need to find a replacement in the school if they're going to be moving on. So yeah, I totally understand that difficulty, and you know, also working with school gardens, knowing that trying to ask more from the teachers isn't always the best thing. On a different note, I'm advocating in Maine for what we're calling garden coaches, so like a stipend position for somebody to take care of gardens in schools over the summer and to do a small garden club every now and then. And those would be folks who would also take care of an orchard. A big part of the orchard model is they need less work, and stressing those high moments of importance as far as wrapping hardware cloth around the trees in the fall. Those are some of the biggest things that folks can do. And yeah, as I said, the application process, finding orchard caretakers that are really going to be committed to their school orchards, really important.
Well, thank you again, Richard and Lee. We're going to wrap up here. Just wanted to mention, so going ahead, we have these webcasts every fourth Tuesday of each month, and next one coming up is July 28th with Dominic Vitiello, who will be talking about gleaning program models from across the country. And if you want to continue any of the conversations we started here today, you can post questions or comments to our Google group. And again, you can join up with that at orchard@actrees.org. Thank you.